What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving into one of the biggest what-ifs in human history. Imagine a world where Emperor Constantine never sees that flaming cross in the sky before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. No Edict of Milan, no Council of Nicaea. What happens to the Roman Empire and the rest of us if Rome stays stubbornly, proudly pagan? Grab your laurel wreaths because this timeline is wild. The survival of the imperial cult. First off, Rome wouldn't have just stayed with the old, Greek-style gods like Jupiter and Mars. By the 4th century, those were already fading. Without Christianity, Rome likely would have leaned into Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, or Mithraism. Instead of a pope in Rome, the emperor remains the Pontifex Maximus, not just a political leader, but a literal living god. This keeps the religious and state power fused perfectly together. There's no church versus state conflict because the state is the church, a harder, more martial society. Christianity introduced, at least in theory, a certain level of soft power, concepts like humility, turning the other cheek, and the idea that the poor are blessed. Without it, Rome likely maintains its hypermasculine, martial culture. The gladiatorial games might have lasted centuries longer. The Roman virtues would remain centered on gloria, in glory and auctoritas, authority. In this timeline, the meek don't inherit the earth. The guy with the biggest legion does. The Great Library of the West. One of the biggest changes? Science and philosophy. In our timeline, many pagan texts were lost or suppressed by the early church. If the empire stays pagan, the Platonic academies and the Library of Alexandria might have survived much longer. We might have seen a scientific revolution happen 1,000 years early, or at least a continuous line of classical learning that avoids the intellectual dip of the early Middle Ages, the barbarian problem. Here is where it gets dicey for Rome. Christianity was the glue that eventually converted the Germanic tribes, the Goths, Vandals, and Franks. It gave the Romans and the barbarians a common language and a shared god. Without Christianity, the Germanic tribes remain fiercely tribal and pagan. There is no Holy Roman Empire later on. Europe remains a fractured collection of warring chiefdoms for much longer, possibly preventing the rise of unified nations like France or Germany as we know them. What about Islam? This is the butterfly effect no one talks about. Islam rose in the 7th century in a world defined by the rivalry between a Christian Byzantium and a Zoroastrian Persia. If Rome is still pagan, the religious vacuum in the Middle East looks completely different. Perhaps a pagan Rome is stronger and crushes the early caliphates, or perhaps, without the unifying force of Christianity to oppose it, Islam spreads even faster into a religiously fractured Europe. The verdict: a faster but colder world. If Rome never goes Christian, we likely live in a world that is technologically more advanced but socially much harsher. We might have reached the moon by 1200 AD, but we might still be watching people fight to the death in the Colosseum for entertainment. But hey, that's just a theory. What do you think? Would the empire have survived longer, or would it have collapsed into 1,000 tiny pieces without a central faith to hold it together? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into alternate history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. It really helps the channel out.